Some people just disappear. They walk out the door one day and are never seen again. It happens, but it doesn't usually happen to a New York State Supreme Court justice. It especially doesn't happen to a man like Judge Joseph Force Crater. He was a man about town. A man with friends in high places and low places. He was well known. He had a big personality. And then, on a hot summer night in 1930, he stepped into a taxi on a busy Manhattan street and vanished from the face of the earth. He became, as the papers called him, the missingest man in New York, and nobody to this day knows for sure what happened to him. To understand the disappearance, you have to understand the man. Joseph Crater wasn't born into wealth or power. He was born in Pennsylvania in 1889. He was smart and ambitious. He worked his way through college and then Columbia Law School. He was a hard worker. He got a job teaching law and then started climbing the ladder. He was charming. People liked him. He knew how to make connections. And in New York City in the 1920s, the most important connection was Tammany Hall. Tammany Hall was the Democratic Party political machine. It ran the city. It picked the mayors, the judges, the police commissioners. Nothing got done in New York without Tammany's approval. It was a club of power, and it was notoriously corrupt. If you were a loyal friend of Tammany, you could go far. Crater became a very loyal friend. He worked for the machine. He did favors. He knew the right people. He eventually became president of his local Democratic club. His personal life was just as busy. He was married to a woman named Stella Wheeler. Their marriage was complicated. They seemed to care for each other, but Crater had a weakness for showgirls and nightlife. He spent a lot of time in Broadway theaters and speakeasies. He had mistresses. He spent money freely. He wore tailored suits and was always seen at the best restaurants. He lived the high life. He was a man who enjoyed being seen. In April 1930, his loyalty to Tammany Hall paid off. The Governor Franklin D. Roosevelt appointed him to a vacant seat on the New York State Supreme Court. It was a huge promotion. He was now Justice Crater. He was a man of immense power and prestige. But that power came from a system that was starting to crack. Investigations into corruption were beginning. A special prosecutor named Samuel Seabury was starting to poke around, looking into dirty deals and bribes within the city's government. And Judge Crater, a man made by that very system, was right in the middle of it. That summer, the summer of 1930, was a strange one for the judge. He and Stella had a summer home in Maine. In late July, he got a phone call in Maine. He told Stella he had to go back to the city for a few days. He said he had to straighten out those fellows. He didn't say who the fellows were. He promised to be back in a few days, in time for her birthday on August 9th. He seemed worried. Before he left, he cashed 2 checks at their local bank. The checks were made out to cash. They totaled over $5,000. That was a lot of money in 1930. He put the cash in his pocket and went back to New York. He arrived in the city on August 3rd. He spent the next couple of days working in his courthouse chambers. He was seen carrying briefcases full of papers. A clerk later said the judge destroyed a number of documents. On the morning of August 6th, he spent 2 hours in his office going through his files. He had his law clerk cash 2 more checks for him, again for a large sum of money. Then he took a portfolio of papers and had his assistant take it back to his apartment on 5th Avenue. He told the man to leave it there. That evening, August 6th, was the last time anyone could account for his whereabouts. He bought a ticket for a Broadway show called Dancing Partner at the Belasco Theater. He didn't use the ticket. Instead, he went to dinner. He met up with a lawyer friend, William Klein, and a showgirl mistress, Sally Lou Ritz, at a chop house on West 45th Street. It was a place called Billy Haas's. They had a pleasant dinner. They talked and laughed. Nothing seemed out of the ordinary. Crater seemed to be in a good mood. Around 9:15 p.m., he told his companions he had to leave. He stood up from the table. Klein asked him where he was going. Crater was vague. He might go see the show. He had a ticket for it. He might go somewhere else. He walked out of the restaurant and onto the street. He waved down a taxi. He smiled at Klein and Ritz through the cab window. He said, "I'm going to get a little fun." And the taxi pulled away into the traffic of Times Square. Joseph Force Crater was never seen again. Here's where the story gets even stranger. He was gone, but nobody knew it yet. His wife Stella was still in Maine, expecting him back for her birthday. When he didn't show up on August 9th, she wasn't immediately alarmed. He was often busy. She made some calls. His friends hadn't seen him. His clerks at the courthouse hadn't seen him. The days turned into a week, then 2. Stella started to panic. She called more influential friends, but they advised her to wait. Reporting a Supreme Court justice missing would cause a scandal. It would be bad for Tammany Hall. It would be bad for his career, so she waited. Finally, after almost a month of silence, the story broke. On September 3rd, the police officially opened a missing persons case. The newspapers went wild. A judge had vanished into thin air. It was the biggest story in the country. The police launched a massive investigation. They dragged Rivers. They searched his apartment. They interviewed hundreds of people, his friends, his colleagues, his wife, his mistresses. They found nothing. No body, no ransom note, no sign of a struggle. It was as if he had simply dissolved. The investigation did turn up some strange clues. Back in his apartment, his chambers were in perfect order. His suits hung in the closet. But inside a dresser drawer, police found something startling. It was an envelope. Inside were several other envelopes. They contained thousands of dollars in cash. They also contained stock certificates and a list of people who owed him money. And there was a short cryptic note. It was addressed to his wife. The note made it sound like he was in some kind of trouble, possibly financial trouble, and that he might not be coming back. He ended it with the words, "I am very weary. Love, Joe." This discovery changed everything. This wasn't just a man who forgot to come home. This was a man who seemed to be preparing for something. He had withdrawn large amounts of cash. He had gathered his important papers and his money. He had left a farewell note of sorts for his wife. This suggested he had planned his disappearance. Maybe he ran away. Maybe he was starting a new life somewhere else. This became one of the main theories. Did Judge Crater just walk away from it all? He had a complicated life, a wife in Maine and mistresses in the city. He had financial pressures. Maybe he was tired of it all. The note said, "I am very weary." Maybe he took the money he had withdrawn, got in that taxi, and went to a train station or a port and just left. He could have gone to another country and started over with a new identity. People do that. It was a plausible theory, but it had problems. Crater loved the spotlight. He loved being Judge Crater. It seemed out of character for him to give up his power and prestige to live in obscurity. And if he ran away with a woman, who was she? Sally Lou Ritz, the showgirl he had dinner with, was questioned extensively. She had an alibi for the time after he disappeared. No other woman ever came forward. No one ever reported seeing him with a female companion. If he didn't run away, then the alternative was much darker. Something happened to him. The other major theory was that he was murdered. This theory had a lot more weight, especially given his connections. Remember, he was a creature of Tammany Hall. And Tammany Hall was being investigated by the Seabury Commission. The commission was digging into the sale of judgeships, bribery, and all sorts of corruption. Crater was right in the thick of it. He knew things. He knew who paid whom. He knew where the bodies were buried, figuratively speaking. Was he about to be called to testify? Was he a liability to powerful people? The timing was suspicious. The investigation was heating up. Perhaps the fellows he told his wife he needed to straighten out were his political patrons. And maybe they gave him an ultimatum, keep quiet or else. Or maybe he was already cooperating with the investigators and they found out. A man like Judge Crater, with his deep knowledge of the machine's inner workings, would be a devastating witness. For the bosses of Tammany Hall, silencing him would be a logical, if brutal, solution. This theory branches out into the world of organized crime. Tammany Hall had deep ties to the mob. Gangsters like Dutch Schultz and Auntie Madden ran the city's speakeasies and illegal rackets. They worked hand in hand with the politicians and police. If Tammany wanted someone gone, the mob had the means to make it happen. A professional hit would be clean and quiet. A body could be disposed of in a way that it would never be found. Dropped in the East River with concrete shoes. Buried in the swamps of New Jersey. Burned in a furnace. The mob knew how to make people disappear permanently. There was a specific rumor that tied Crater to a mob-run gambling house. The story went that Crater was involved in a financial scheme that went bad. He owed money to the wrong people, or maybe he was involved in shaking down illegal businesses and his greed got the better of him. In that world, a dispute over money wasn't settled in court. It was settled in a dark alley or a basement. A bullet was cheaper than a lawyer. The fact that he was last seen in the theater district, a hub of both entertainment and underworld activity, only fueled this speculation. He was in their territory. Another possibility was a crime of passion. He had many affairs. Was there a jealous husband? A scorned lover? It's possible, but police looked into this and found no credible leads. The people in his life, even the ones he was cheating with, seemed to genuinely like him. A random street crime, like a robbery gone wrong, also seemed unlikely. He was a prominent figure, and a mugging of a Supreme Court justice on a busy street would have likely had witnesses. No one saw anything. The taxi driver was never identified. It was as if the cab itself was a ghost. For years, the case remained open. It became a national obsession. Pulling a Crater became slang for disappearing. There were reported sightings of him all over the country and even the world. He was seen dealing cards in an Arizona casino. He was spotted on a beach in Florida. He was working on a boat in Africa. Every few months, a new story would pop up. The police checked out every single lead. They all turned out to be false alarms. Men who just happened to look like the famous missing judge. His wife Stella never gave up hope, at least not publicly. For years, she kept the light on in their apartment, a symbol that he might one day return. She wrote a book about the disappearance called The Empty Robe. In it, she maintained that he was murdered by the corrupt political forces he was involved with. She believed he was killed because he was about to expose them. In 1939, 9 years after he vanished, Judge Joseph Forscrater was declared legally dead. Stella could finally access his estate. She lived a long life, always known as the widow of the missing judge. She passed away in 1969. The years turned into decades. The case files grew dusty. The people who knew Crater grew old and died. Tammany Hall fell from power. The world of speakeasies and political bosses faded into history. The disappearance of Judge Crater became a piece of New York folklore, a great unsolved mystery alongside legends like the disappearance of Amelia Earhart. It seemed the truth had died with that generation. But then, in 2005, there was one last strange twist. A woman named Stella Ferrucci, the widow of a man who had been a New York City police detective, died. While going through her belongings, her family found a sealed envelope. Inside was a handwritten note. The note was from the woman's mother-in-law, a woman who had died years earlier. The note claimed to reveal the truth about what happened to Judge Crater. The note was a deathbed confession of sorts, written by a woman named Virginia, who said she got the information from her husband, a police officer. It told a story. It said that on the night of August 6, 1930, Judge Crater was not taken by a random taxi. He was picked up by a car driven by a police officer who was working for the mob. The note named the officer. It also named a high-ranking Tammany official who ordered the hit. And it named the hitman, a low-level enforcer. According to this letter, they drove the judge to Coney Island in Brooklyn. They took him under the boardwalk, and there they killed him. They buried his body in the sand, under the spot where the New York Aquarium was later built. The story was shocking. It named names, it gave a location, it seemed to solve the mystery after 75 years. The police looked into it. The names mentioned in the letter were real people. The police officer named was a known associate of the mob. The hitman was a known killer. The details seemed to fit, but it was still just a story, written decades after the fact, based on hearsay. The supposed burial site was now covered in tons of concrete and steel. There was no way to excavate it. There was no way to find a body to prove the story was true. The letter was a tantalizing clue, perhaps the final piece of the puzzle. But without physical evidence, it remained just that, another theory. The most detailed and plausible theory, perhaps, but still not definitive. So, what happened to Judge Joseph Forscrater? The honest answer is that we will probably never know for sure. The trail went cold almost a century ago. All the witnesses are dead. All the participants are gone. All that's left is the story. The evidence points in two main directions. He either orchestrated his own escape, or he was murdered. The planned escape theory is supported by his actions in the days leading up to his disappearance. The cash checks, the destroyed papers, the envelope of money and instructions for his wife. These are the actions of a man preparing for a final departure. But his personality and his love for his life of prominence argue against it. He was not a man who seemed suited for a life on the run, a life in the shadows. The murder theory seems more likely, given the context of the time. He was a man deeply enmeshed in a corrupt system that was under threat. Powerful men had a lot to lose if he talked. The world he moved in was filled with dangerous people who solved problems with violence. His sudden, silent, and permanent disappearance has all the hallmarks of a professional mob hit. It was efficient, it was clean. No witnesses, no body, no evidence. They didn't just kill him, they erased him. The letter from 2005 provides a compelling narrative for that murder. It fills in the blanks. It gives us a sequence of events, a motive, and a final resting place. It feels like the truth. But we can't be certain. It's a second-hand account written long after the crime. Memories can be faulty, stories can be embellished. In the end, Joseph Crater remains a ghost. He is a man defined not by his life, but by his exit. He stepped out of a restaurant, into a taxi, and drove straight into American legend. He was a judge, a husband, a lover, a political player, and one night he became a question mark. The city swallowed him whole. The streets of New York are full of stories, but the story of the missing judge is one of its most enduring. It's a reminder that even the most powerful and public figures can, in the blink of an eye, simply cease to be. And all we are left with is the mystery. A man walked into the night, and the night never gave him back.